Aloha to Lo-Fi, welcome back. So, if you watch me, you know a little bit about China. I talk about China sometimes, the Belt and Road, BRICS, all that. This is going to be about their EVs, electric vehicles. BYD is the name of the company. I'm not sure what it stands for. They might go into it. So, Chinese EVs obliterate U.S. competition. Let's see. Oh, Krystal and Saagar from Breaking Point. You probably know these guys.
Now to Chinese EV maker BYD, which has just made a huge announcement that could potentially change the EV industry. Let's put this up there on the screen. News came out of China just yesterday. BYD will now offer, quote, God's Eye self-driving system on all of its models. So BYD obviously is the largest electric vehicle maker in China, and it now has a quote unquote advanced self-driving system. Now, every video I've watched says it's roughly equal to the Tesla full self-driving. It has some important differences that the L3 nerds will dig into, but let's just say it's better than what's on your Toyota CR or your Honda CRV assisted autopilot. So we leave it at that. But the extraordinary part of it is not the raw fact that it's rolling out, but the fact that it is now installing it on every single model that they sell, including the Seagull budget hatchback, which it currently retails inside of China for $9,600. Yes, you heard me correctly. This is a huge deal because it challenges the Tesla market share abroad. So in the United States, obviously you cannot buy BYD, you can't buy any of these Chinese EVs. But China, which we're about to get to, is a net
Where's the capitalist competition? Why we can't buy those EVs?
exporter actually of cars. Their electric vehicles are highly desirable for many people across the world, in Europe and elsewhere, in a lot of areas, especially with cheaper cost of living. They have genuine innovation in a lot of their electric car industry. They have a battery supply chain, which is heavily relied on by Tesla and other US automakers. So they are, I would put them almost 15, 20 years ahead of us. They don't have no EPA telling them what they can and can't do. They're like, if you can extend the range, if you need regulation, the government is there to help you because it's an instrument of national power. And it's extraordinary. You were talking in the intro, how Americans currently have a real boom.
They don't have no EPA to get in the way, but China, they had a real bad smog problem at one time, and then they cleaned themselves up. They cleaned the air up, whatever you want to call it. They started planting all these trees in different desert spots to help with pollution and regreening certain areas and whatnot. So even without a what you would call an EPA, they probably have something that China calls whatever they would call it that looks at their environment and says different things that they need to do because they do look at their environment and they do fix their environment and help their environment get better. So just because they don't call it EPA, that doesn't mean anything.
Boomer mindset around Chinese cars. I love electric vehicles. I'll be totally transparent. If these weren't from China, I would buy one in a heartbeat. They are better than
cool.
any cars that we sell here in America.
No, if we didn't have like just a block on these.
Yeah.
So these are Chinese cars that they sell in China. So people talk about what China doesn't have or China isn't as good or whatever. China seems to have a lot of nice things.
Oh, I would buy them. Yeah, there's no question. If it was any other country, I would buy it.
Our domestic EV industry would be dead.
Oh, dead.
Over.
Dead as a door.
Over.
There's only a few select people who are telling Americans and others
Dang.
how good these cars are. And one of these guys who I follow.
So is that true capitalism? They said if China was allowed to sell its cars in the U.S., our EV cars or EV sales would be dead as a doornail.
Is Forrest. He does Forrest auto reviews. I love the way that he does reviews, but he's able to get his hands on a lot of different Chinese EVs. I watch like every video that this guy does. So we thought we would put together a mashup of some of the cars, the Chinese EVs reviews that he's done in the past. The very last one that we'll show you is the actual Seagull from BYD that we were talking about, but this is a range of luxury EV down to the most budget model. So you got to see here what we are missing out on.
What is up, guys? Right behind me is a car from China,
I actually seen this guy yesterday.
which is a big deal because there's currently no Chinese manufacturers in America, which is kind of a shame because this car is really cool.
This car is really
So obviously you can use your key, or you can leave your key at home and use NFC. This car is a plug-in hybrid, and on just the battery, it can do about 60 miles, which is more than any plug-in hybrid in America. And on a full charge and a full tank of gas, it can do well over 650 miles. If I push the button on the side of my seat, that'll fold down my armrest. My seats are heated, ventilated, and massaging. I have an area right down here for my phone.
Massage sheets. He blew right on past that. Like, dang, that's big time.
I have built-in sunscreen shades. If I push this button, my cup holder comes out, and I can do this. I'm 6 feet tall for reference. You can be 7 feet tall and still lounge back here. But what if I want to watch a movie? A TV can't fold up into this small space, but a projector can. Yeah, this is pretty sweet. You also get a built-in fridge.
A fridge, huh?
Are you tired of stuff falling?
Behind me is what $8,400 can get you in China.
$8,400.
This is the Wuling Bingo. It's a tiny 4-door EV. It starts at $8,400, but even fully loaded, it's only $12,000. You get full LED lights, these tiny cute wheels, and it can do 250 miles on a full charge. You also get a lot of space in the trunk.
You guys see what I'm talking about? I mean, look, let's be honest. These cars are sick. There's other ones, not even BYD. I can't pronounce them, but the self-driving tech, the lounge, and they retail for like $60,000. There are several like Japanese similarities, not EVs per se, but Lexus and Toyota models that are only available in Japan. But they're not sending their best over here. But I wanted people to understand this because the rest of the globe has access to BYD. And they like it. And this is one of...
So this is one thing that these tariffs and such do to the American people. We don't have access to these cool cars and a lot of other Chinese stuff and probably other stuff manufactured in other countries. Probably Russia, right? We don't get stuff out of there. I don't know if Cuba manufactures stuff, but they have the Doctors Around the World program. I don't know if they send them here or not, but we probably don't let them send them here as much as they would. So yeah,
the most extraordinary.
We miss out on things by these tariffs and the way we treat people around the world.
Differences now because Tesla obviously is probably the most successful, auto startup of all time.
And they have Tesla in China, so he competes in China against them, and they've beaten him in China, Elon Musk or whatever. So that's why they don't want him here. I bet Elon's a big reason they don't want China here.
Time in the United States. It is currently the crown jewel of the American EV industry. Obviously, Elon and all of that removed. It's one of the top sellers of cars in almost every state in the United States. I believe the Tesla Model 3 or the Model Y was one of the top sellers in the state of California. We've done a lot of bets through the IRA, industrial policy, on this saying, oh, we're going to try and compete. But the truth is, it's like we are getting our asses kicked at a very structural level. You can see here clearly how even just 4 years ago, that the United States and China were roughly tied in terms of the car exports to the rest of the world. Well, in the last 4 years, they've gone stratospheric, and now they have more cars exported to the rest of the world than Japan, Mexico, Germany, South Korea, and the United States. So there has been a massive shift in the way that Chinese car exports have become a central part of their ability to trade with the rest of the world. And this goes to the central heart of the problem between the US economy and the Chinese economy. They build shit, and they do it well. Their government policy is all organized around finding people like the BYD CEO and being like, what do you need? You need a supply chain? We'll build it for you. Oh, you need expedited approval and market share and all of this industrial capacity? Done. And 5-10 years ago, or actually even 20 years ago, a lot of people didn't believe, Charlie Munger, our famous investor, he said...
And so they call them communists, right? And we have these two corporate parties in America that they just give the corporations money, right? They don't even run things right. Like the Communist Party seems to be able to run business, run innovation, run science, run technology far better than the competitive, capitalist, greedy, pay my CEO more and my inventor less and my employees less, screw them, right? Like, it's crazy. I don't know, this is wild to me.
Said that the BYD CEO is one of the smartest people who we ever met in his entire life. And that if he could have bet more on the company, that he would have. I listened to the last interview that he ever gave with Acquired. Capacity, done. And 5-10 years ago, or actually even 20 years ago, a lot of people didn't believe, Charlie Munger, our famous investor, he said that the BYD CEO is one of the smartest people who we ever met in his entire life. And that if he could have bet more on the company, that he would have. I listened to the last interview that he ever gave with Acquired. Highly recommend it if you can. But just to give people an example of how they back their critical entrepreneurs who make stuff in the physical world. And the payoff on their technology is that
Well, we back Elon Musk very, very much. We give him all kinds of subsidies. We give all kinds of business people subsidies. We just, in capitalism, they kind of use it differently, it seems.
by getting 10, 15 years ahead of us, they are now exponentially in just 4 years topping the United States, even Japan, in terms of the number of net exports. Without export control, it's over. It's over.
True.
In terms of electric vehicles. Now, maybe we can catch up. You got to buy us 10, 15 years, but we don't control the European Union. We don't control the export laws of a huge number of U.S. allies. And what is the most revealed preference of all time across the world? Consumers want what? Good products at cheap prices. And if you give them the option, they're going to buy it. So this is an existential problem that we have. And their ability to compete, to offer full self-driving for free on a $10,000 car. In the U.S., we buy a Tesla. You want full self-driving, you either pay up to $100 a month or $8,000 up front. $8,000 for the software, which is roughly, 20% less than the price of the car in China. So that's what we're dealing with here. Now, obviously, it's a tiny little hatchback, but still, what's a Toyota Camry go for these days? Probably $30,000?
Probably, yeah.
I'm guessing here, I'll look it up while you react.
Well, I was going to say, a part of why they have so many exports of their
28,000,
vehicles
yeah.
is there's been a huge shift, which has been incentivized by the government in China towards electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. So half of the new vehicles bought in China now are either EVs or they're plug-in hybrids. So now they have all of these traditional gas-powered vehicles that Chinese consumers no longer really want. And so that's a lot of what is being offloaded into Europe and other places around the world.
What Chinese consumers no longer want. So it seems like they react to their consumer base.
World and has been very popular in the Middle East, very popular in Latin America, because they're so cost efficient. But I think the piece about the differences between the economies is really important, because they did 15 years ago, they identified that a particular Chinese premier who identified EVs as one of their highest priorities, and they invested a lot of money into it. And they, also this actually does touch on the USAID discussion as well, because China's Belt and Road Initiative, part of their effort of projecting soft power and building goodwill around the world, was about establishing these supply chains specifically for EV batteries. And they have done a tremendous job in locking up a lot of those mineral resources. USAID, as Senator Chris, it was Chris Murphy, I think, that kind of let the cat on the bag about what USAID is actually about. One of the things that he name-checked was securing rare earth minerals around the world. And he's right about that. That is part of the goal of USAID. So, for example, the HIV program that PEPFAR that has been in place since the George W. Bush administration, one of the countries where it has been incredibly important and been a genuine lifeline for people is Zambia. Well, Zambia had a huge problem with HIV and AIDS. It's in a much better place now because of the investments that we made there. But also Zambia happens to have a lot of mines of things like cobalt. And we have invested a lot of money and been able to have those partnerships in Zambia of securing those rare earth materials, as Chris Murphy said, in part because of those more sort of humanitarian investments that we made in the country. So when we talk about, So
we do know how to do that a little bit. I've talked a lot about how we should go around the world building like China, and rather than going around the world warring like we do. But I guess we do build a little bit or help a little bit in some places.
A real world example of when we say soft power projection, I know that can sound very abstract. That's the sort of thing that we're talking about. And that's what China has really accomplished with their Belt and Road Initiative very, very effectively. But because they have been so much more intentional about their industrial policy, and really got, while we were still in full-on neoliberal mode and industrial policy was and tariffs were a dirty word, they were planning for what the industries of the future would be and where they wanted to lead. And now with BYD, we see the way that has really paid off for them.
It's shocking. 8 to 9% of new car sales in the European Union as of early 2024, according to Claude, are made in China. 8 to 9%. This is after a 39% increase from just the year 2023. So in a 4-year period, they are gobbling up European car market share. And like I said, I mean, their ability to compete in the supply chain, compare those BYD vehicles to a Rivian. Look, no offense, I think Rivians look cool. They cost like $80,000 and they go like 200 miles. And if you get into...
I think they look dumb, personally.
Really? I think that I like the look of them.
You have more of an affinity for these like futuristic.
I do.
I'm not a fan. The Cybertruck, I think is the ugliest
I like both.
thing I've
I like
ever seen.
futuristic stuff. I really love retro stuff. So stuff like a Ford Bronco,
Yeah.
the old...
Yeah, those are cool.
well.
That I'm down with.
But yeah, I mean, Rivian,
Ford
fine.
Bronco.
It's a hot selling car. People really like them, but they're paying $80,000 for it. Okay, in China, if you pay $80,000 for an EV, it's gonna be like that projector car.
Yeah, I've started seeing those Rivians on the street. Like, I didn't know what they were. Is that a new company or something? I guess it's an EV. Is it like from GM or something, or is it a whole different company? I don't know.
It's gonna have 2 recliners in the back seat and a nice little tray where you can eat
And a
hot pot
refrigerator
with
and-
built-in chopsticks. If you want a car like that here in America, you're gonna pay $200,000, and you probably still won't even be able to. You still won't even get half of the features that are inside of it. That's the stakes of what we're talking about. So I'm worried. I don't see any indication that we're gonna get our act together. One thing the Chinese do, which I think is amazing, is they have these gas generator EVs, which is just a plug-in hybrid or kind of equivalent, where they have an 800-mile range, where you have a gas generator on top of an EV battery that has a 300 miles. I mean, that would be incredibly useful. It basically makes it so that you could have hybrid systems where you can fill gas and a supercharger network. Stuff like that doesn't even exist here.
Yeah.
You know, our plug-in, what's the best plug-in hybrid in America? I'm trying to think. Probably a
have no
Toyota
idea.
RAV4, if I had to guess, in terms of affordability. I don't think that thing goes more than like 40 miles on a
What?
range. So just think about the difference that we have in terms of what and we pay more than their cars.
Yes.
Not to mention insurance and all this other
Capitalism.
bullshit.
Well, and I mean, Trump
Yeah.
has made it quite clear that any sort of EV support, you know, that was previously provided under the Biden administration, he wants to roll back. I know they've specifically stripped the funding from the program to build out the charger network, which obviously makes it much more feasible for regular people to be able to have EVs, and, you know, also helps to provide a market for domestic EV producers. So it's the opposite of a priority from the Trump administration. So I don't see any indication why we would catch up at this
I mean,
point.
honestly, maybe it's the right thing to do, because like, why should we even compete at this point? It's like, let's just buy
don't give
gas
up, Saagar.
vehicles, and it's like that's all we're really good at. We pump a
gas
lot
vehicles.
of gas because they have so clearly they have so clearly gotten ahead on this that without direct investment now, we wouldn't even be able to compete for a decade. I still just can't get over that chart of the 4-year period of their ability to export. It's insane. So look, I've said it before. People think I hate China, or it's like, no, I respect them. that's in terms of my criticism of America. It's that we don't even come close in so many areas of their ability to think strategically, to think long term, to develop an industry if they want to. Even the DeepSeek idea is let's do the same thing for cheaper. You can't help but respect a lot of competition,
Yeah.
even if it makes you look foolish.
I mean, I also think it was so, and maybe this isn't a sort of overemphasized part of the DeepSeek story, but the fact that the Chinese government was like, we don't want our best and brightest going into the financial sector. We don't want them to just be like financial speculators. Oh, and by the way, they're like, we're not crypto. We're not doing that shit.
Well,
like,
yeah.
we're not doing that shit.
That's the Indians
So-
too. They also hate crypto.
They're smart.
Yeah.
Because we're funneling like some of our brightest talent into these just like brazen Ponzi schemes. Crypto and financial engineering on Wall Street is like the more refined version of that. And we're like, they were like, we're not really interested in doing that. We're going to cut the salaries for financial type jobs and push our best and brightest graduates into research and technology, whether it's AI or whether it's EV battery development, et cetera. And that also is an important component of this. Is like, where do your best minds, your best technical minds, where do they go? And in the U.S., oftentimes
McKinsey.
it's hey,
Yeah.
McKinsey.
And how do you get the best minds? We gotta have schools. We gotta have good schools. We gotta have people going to college for STEM and whatnot.
It's Wall Street, it's Goldman. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, if you like.
So China's EVs are better than ours. I've gone over China's rail. I'm just gonna put this at the end of the video here. Show a little bit about China's rail system here. How more advanced they are in all kinds of ways than us.
There are high-speed rail networks around the world, but then there's the network in China. It's an insanely large web of track that's helped to ignite an economic powerhouse. In little over a decade, the country's built enough high-speed lines to almost circle the globe, and the system welcomed 1.7 billion passengers in 2019 alone. To put that into context, the UK built a high-speed rail line between London and the Channel Tunnel in the 2000s that's equivalent to 0.2% of China's current network. The new HS2 line was first proposed in 2009, and Phase 1 of it is due to complete in 2033. The US has one high-speed line in the northeast, but it's arguably not actually high speed, and California's new line won't open before 2029.
And so I wanted to show a story of Oahu. We're building a rail system here. It's open a little bit now. We started in 2005, and it's still not fully open. We have I think maybe 2 or 5 miles, something ridiculous. I'll look it up and say at the end. But here's the story. Here's a little clip of it. And again, everything will be in the description in the bottom.
Rail has been floated for Oahu many times, dating back as far as the 1960s, only to fall apart at pivotal moments, like in 1992, when Councilmember Reen Mancho cast the deciding no vote, despite being a longtime rail advocate, on a tax hike to fund a train.
When that vote failed, right, the senator said no more. We're not going to do this until I see a governor and a mayor that want it.
In comes a pair that had another idea for mass transit.
Governor Ben and Harris, and so it was a pivot, and we had more bus, right? There was so not a bad thing. There was way more investment with bus.
But when a train came up again in the early 2000s,
yeah, so we stopped doing our rail for a while. I started talking about rail and then did more of a bus system. But then I moved to Hawaii in 2004, 2005, and they were talking about this rail that I'm talking about now.
Even rail advocates were skeptical.
I served in the state senate, and that's when we passed in
this big concrete thing.
2005, 2006, the first.
Our rail is a huge, just concrete block, just going down the middle of the street like that. It looks pretty much exactly like that.
GET for rail.
So basically, I just wanted to show a little bit about rails, right? The way we do it in America and the way they do it in China. China, they get stuff done so fast, and they're so far ahead of us. Like they say, if it's made in China, it's cheap, right? They probably just send us their cheap stuff because we don't want to pay high prices for things, right? And then we just buy cheap things from China. That's what our government does. We don't get the nice cars. We could have nicer trains and stuff. We could have trains all over America if we worked with China and worked with. I mean, we were I don't know. It's just crazy. We could have so much more if we were more, cooperative rather than competitive type of society. But I mean, that's just how we think over here across the spectrum.